The future is here.
Wow, amazing. Couple kubble and good evening, folks, and welcome to tonight's conversation on Rethinking Food Systems, presented to you by the Environmental Film Festival Australia's Out of This World, a thought-provoking online event. Now, Out of This World takes a closer look at the interactions between science, technology, philosophy, and art, and aims to facilitate conversations that make the familiar unfamiliar, or strangely familiar and familiarly strange. My name is Tish King, and I'm a proud Torres Strait Islander woman with strong connections to Mustig and Badu Island, and I will be your moderator for tonight. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge country. Knowing that we're all tuning in from different areas, where I am, I would like to acknowledge the people of the Turrbal and Yagara lands. I would like to pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I would also like to acknowledge every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, people that identify as Indigenous, and people of colour that are watching. And we remember that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, I'm so excited to be here. It's going to be a really fun time. I am the community organizer at Seed Indigenous Youth Climate Network, often referred to as Seed Mob. So for those who don't actually know who Seed Mob are, we are Australia's first Indigenous organisation that is on the front lines of climate justice. We have been building a movement of young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to protect their land, rivers, and oceans from the causes and impacts of climate change. Now, First Nations people have honed and really employed holistic land management practices for thousands of generations. These practices are embedded in all aspects of our culture. They are so effective, so perfectly suited to this harshest of continents, that we are the oldest living culture in the world today. As we now approach, still in mourning of the year before, many Australians are shifting the way they live, consume, and sustain our beautiful country. Still living in unprecedented times of this international health pandemic, this year has taught us much about connection to food, farms, and our neighbours. And as we go, many of us discovered a love for local produce and home cooking. I mean, how many of you out there during this pandemic made sourdough or banana bread? I mean, I certainly tried to attempt, but massive fail, but can't be shame about that. But I guess it really comes down to, like, the curious people that we are. What do you think post-COVID-19 food systems should look like? Rethinking Food Systems will discuss the intersecting issues of food citizenship, native foods, and the impacts of COVID-19 and food system transformation. Tonight, we have two incredible people joining us this evening, who in their own right have been shifting the way in which Australians eat food and what they serve on their table. Please welcome Erica from Farmer Meets Foodie and Nornie from Mabu Mabu. If you both can unmute yourselves and actually just introduce yourself a little bit about who you are and just about your business. Maybe we'll kick off with Nornie.
Hi, I'm Nornie Bero, the owner of Mabu Mabu, which is I guess you could say we're an Indigenous food business, as well as we have a restaurant here in Melbourne. And our whole emphasis is of using native ingredients and just kind of making sure that people understand about, Australian food coming from Australians. Just ordinary food that we have here in Australia and getting it into everybody's pantries, which is something that I find very interesting, that, half of maybe 90% of Australians don't have one native ingredient in their, cupboard. And how can we make that grow to a bigger proportion? And how can we get cuisine? When someone says, what is Australian cuisine? I want them to be saying, Australian food, not a pizza or like, we have beautiful multicultural countries here, but I would love the Indigenous community to have our own, our own bit as well. And when someone asks, what's the national food of Australia, why not say damper? That's all I'm saying, which would be really great.
Oh, that's so great. And whereabouts are you from, Nornie?
Oh, I live in Melbourne, but I'm a Miriam girl. So from the Murray Islands, born and raised island girl with a spear in my hand. So I grew up with basically growing everything and hunting for my own food. So it makes me feel now that I have to hunt in the city for that, and really go out there and forage a little differently than I used to when I was younger. But growing up on a tropical island is like a dream for people, and it was my reality, which is fantastic. And I think now, being an adult, I've really is very thankful that I was raised that way, because it makes me be able to, I guess, withstand what has happened with us in COVID, and really looked back on my upbringing of really getting me through those tough times. Because when you grow up with nothing, you know how to survive on nothing, so I think it's like one of those things that have always been really fantastic for me to actually learn during this time.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. I actually can't wait to delve more into and asking more questions about that. And Erica from Farmer Meets Foodie, welcome.
Hi Tish, hi Nornie, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So I'm from Far North Foodie up in Far North Queensland, based on the Atherton Tablelands. We've got a small farm there on Wurundjeri country, just close to the border of Western Yalanji country. But today I'm out in the Gulf at Croydon on Tagalaka country, so just acknowledge the traditional owners here, elders past, present and future. My husband is from here, and it's really nice to be back out here, though it's really, really hot this week. It's 40 degrees, not used to it anymore, but it's been really lovely catching up with everyone.
Oh my gosh, 40 degrees. I head up to North Queensland in a couple of days and I'm freaking out a little bit. Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about Farmer Meets Foodie?
Yeah, so we are really about connecting producers and harvesters directly to those who care about where their food comes from, how it's grown, and a big driver for us is reducing food miles. So where we are in Far North Queensland, most of our produce that's harvested locally will go down to the main markets in Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne and back before we get in our supermarket. So it's travelling at least 3,300 kilometres, which isn't funny, before we get it back, and hugely contributing to global warming and food miles, and reducing quality of a lot of that produce. So that's a big driver for us, as well as getting producers and harvesters a good return for their products. And we're really also keen to engage Indigenous communities and businesses in getting their food out there. As Nornie was saying, we'd love to see more of that produce on our plates.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for both of you sharing that. Well, I think that's a really good segue into, the landscape that we are sort of in, and I guess to look at, your experiences over this, 2020 outlook, because COVID-19 has taken Australia and the world by surprise, right? Coming after severe droughts in Eastern Australia, and there have just been a lot of concerns have been raised about Australian food security. And with the uncertainties around the impacts of COVID-19, at the beginning of the year, we actually saw that hysteria. Hey, I mean, that triggered a rapid increase in purchasing by consumers seeking to stockpile a range of items. Honestly, it was actually disgusting, but it resulted in disruption to stocks of some basic food items. I mean, you know, Nornie and like Erica, like, has this been something that is by, I guess, you know, talking about, you know, reducing food miles and really implementing more native foods? Is this into cooking? Is this sort of what drives your decisions about, you know, running both of your businesses? Maybe if Nornie, if you want to kick us off with that.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, like, you know, for me, I think native food should be at the forefront of what we do here in Australia, because not only can we actually introduce that back into our, you know, our farmlands, it then helps with the environment 100%. You know, I think we cut down as much as we can and we make farmland, but then we grow things that are not supposed to be on there. And then we have to like use different outlets to actually grow those produce when we could be concentrating on other, like, you know, native ingredients. Like for me, it's like how I talk about it is the simple spinach, you know, some spinach. Why can't we be using warrigal greens and that be sold in markets around everywhere that grows like wildfire, especially here in Victoria? It holds itself really well and is really tasty, but yet we can't get a bunch of it in a supermarket or even in a grocer because it's not at the markets. And it's something that can grow really fantastically, and you know, we don't have to do a lot of work for it. I think, you know, if you start thinking about growing natural foods that are for those areas, not only does it help you understand that you can own, and this goes back to like when you have food in season as well. We're so used to getting whatever we want whenever we want that we forget that why don't we just enjoy it when it comes in season? You know, just purely eat a mango only at Christmas. Just eat it at Christmas. That's it. Like, I only eat cherries at Christmas, and I think that's great. Like, why can't we be doing that? And that's what my main thing is. And I buy, like, you know, native produce from local farmers here in Victoria, but also, you know, communities, and only when they're in season, and that's it. You know, you get it when you have. We're just so used to having so much abundance of food at our fingertips that we forget that, you know, why not slow down a little bit and actually enjoy food? Like, enjoy it when it actually comes in season. Because, you know, the best tomatoes I've ever had in my life, it was probably when I went to Europe and they have it beautifully ripened and straight onto your plate, you know. I don't think I've ever had a great tomato in this country because they're always just picked too early or are not ready to eat. And I think we need to start teaching ourselves that.
Firstly, yum to like fresh food. I just got really hungry just then, and I was just like, yes, you're right. Like, appreciating like the produce that our diverse landscape grows during those certain seasons. Really interesting. What about you, Erica? Like, has this been something that's really sort of, I guess, you know, you mentioned that, you know, Farmer Meets Foodie really tries to reduce those food miles, and is that part of like connecting a lot of local farmers straight to restaurants and using that local produce?
Yeah, that's what we're aiming for, Tish. Like what Nornie was saying with the, you know, mangoes and avocados are a great example where we are that they're picked early so that they can travel those long distances, whereas we can, you know, we're trying to get those directly to the restaurants and cafes when they're at their ripest and best in the local area. So at the moment, you know, those local food businesses are missing out on that really fresh and tastiest products because it just stays on the farm because it can't travel when it's that ripe. So this is, you know, we're trying to create that space for them to be able to connect and get it straight from the farm to those places so they can really get that good product. Yeah, I think what you're saying about COVID, so that's really in our area opened up. People really, you know, it was so much, you know, there was a bit at the start, the stores didn't have much on the shelves as far as fresh products, even though we're surrounded by farms and things. But that happens to us in the cyclone season or when there's floods and things as well. But I think this year people really, you know, like you were saying, started to think more about gardening and cooking and have been thinking a lot more about where their food comes from. And we certainly found, you know, we run a close Facebook group to connect foodies and producers and harvesters. And we found a huge uptake, like that group tripled in size, you know, over COVID. So I think people are just really thinking more locally overall, not just in food, but in manufacturing and a whole heap of things. So that's been a positive, I think, to come out of COVID.
I think what I like hearing from that is that it also helps support those local producers as well. And I think for both of you, is that what sustainability in the food industry sort of really looks like as well for both of you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, you know, you always have to start from where your backyard is, you know, and I think that's like really important for us to really focus on that, you know, some of these amazing farms. And one thing I've always like thought about is that I went off and worked for, you know, someone that just only bought organic food, and you've got all these amazing farmers though that might be next to a farm that's got a blowback, and then they can't be certified to become organic, and then you're missing all those beautiful farmers that are there as well. So why are we not just connecting with them as well? And because they're here, they're just like, you know, they're around you, and the produce is there, but we skirt over it because we're so busy with every other product in our face that, you know, we need to stop and actually have a look at what we've got. Like, what's the good stuff that we've got?
Did you want to add anything to that, Erica?
Yeah, absolutely. Just how good it is to be able to see what is available locally and seasonally is, great to do. There's certainly, you know, there's, you know, a few challenges around it, and at the moment there's, you know, quite a bit of inconvenience for you as a shopper to source locally. You might, you know, it's a lot easier to go to the big supermarkets and everything's there, and as you say, you know, things that aren't in season are there, they've travelled from wherever. So that, I guess that's what we're kind of working on, is to make that easier. But there's
I think it does. Yeah, it does kind of start from us, though. You know, it is one of those things that starts from yourself and you as a consumer as well. It's not just about the businesses. It's about your thought process about how you think of things. Like, do I want to eat that avocado when it's not ready? Like, it's not, you know, it's come from somewhere else, or will I just not eat it this time around and really enjoy it? And I think we need to start thinking about it for ourselves as well, not just about businesses, because businesses can try, like I know I do, try and make sure that I always buy seasonal stuff. And, you know, when all the natives come in seasonally, that's the only time I have it. I never have it any after that. Once it's gone, it's gone. And everybody keeps coming, can't I have some more of that? I'm like, no, it's done. Like, you know, you can't get any more of that. And I think we need to start thinking that it is us too. It's our problem as well. We're the ones that have started this of having whatever we want all the time, and we need to start really thinking about it to ourselves, you know, who we are. And if we start it from us, then I think that's how it trickles on, you know, with the rest of the community as well.
I really actually like that, because you brought up something really valid about how this time has actually given us to sort of slow down and really appreciate those seasonal foods. And you're right, like, we have to be the one, or people in the food industry have to be the one sort of really leading this space. And I think that sort of brings out to, you know, like, what is a wow out of this world experience that you have both had that has informed you on how we think about food during this time? Like, you obviously had a vision of your business, you know, prior to this. And I know, Nornie, you've sort of been open as COVID happened. So I'd like to actually hear from both of you how you've had to sort of adapt during this space, or really maybe change the values of the business, or maybe even add value to the space. Erica.
Yeah, it's it's been pretty interesting for us. So we set up originally we were just connecting producers to restaurants and cafes, more of a, just so they could meet each other and start to exchange produce. But we were just about ready to set up our online marketplace as COVID came in. So we were in the middle of rebuilding it so that like a virtual farmers market, which was quite good timing. But we've just found we have a lot of small producers on our platform that have smaller quantities. So we currently working with a bigger producer, and trying out delivering straight. It's actually a seafood producer straight from the trawler to people's homes. So that's been, just trying different things to see what works and that's really seasonal as well. So usually that product will go straight to Brisbane or even overseas for prepared, and we don't usually get it in Far North Queensland, even though it's harvested here. So just working with a bigger company to try that out and see if we can retain some of that local product and distribute it locally has been pretty exciting and challenging. And we just had our first deliveries last week, so that's probably been an exciting time for us.
I bet. I was following you on Instagram and saw the amazing work that you and your family were doing, and sort of running down to Townsville and back in a day. And I was like, Che, too long, big drive.
I didn't get the post finished because I was a bit exhausted and I had to come out here. So I'll get some more up next week. But
amazing. And Nornie, what about you? Tell us about a bit about how Mabu Mabu has sort of adapted.
Well, for me, I just took it from my upbringing, and it's really great, that survival skill that I was raised with, and really looked at my past to show what my present was going to be. And I think that has been a key factor of what we have done for Mabu Mabu. And I just opened, I was only open for I only opened Yarraville for 5 months, I think. And then all of a sudden we were shut. And we shut down for a week and a half and rebranded and came back strong. And we're let's do this. And what can we do to make everybody's lives affordable? Because all of us were hit by this, everybody had mortgages to pay. People had lost their jobs, and how was I going to mentally think about, it wasn't just about me and my business, it was about the family that I built with my staff members as well, and how do I keep them in employment? And you just have to kind of go that next drive and go, how are we going to do this? But let's make it affordable for people to do it as well, because that's one thing that I really push in my business about natives is bringing that price point down and getting Indigenous people in the market to be able to afford to do it, and this industry is not a cheap thing to do. And I want to make a difference. I want I want natives in every pantry. And how was I going to do that during COVID? And I was like, bold move. Let's just let's go another level to give it a go. But, it's the Australian way, to give it a go. And we did. And, a simple thing like damper, and it was what saved my business, and how easy that was to really bring into everybody's kitchens in their own homes. I couldn't have asked for a better way to introduce natives into people's homes, through an amazing thing like damper that I grew up with eating. Because I didn't grow up with fresh bread or anything. I grew up with damper as my bread. Wow. And to be able to showcase that and use natives to really fuel that and really teach people that you can do anything with nothing, with just something really small, and make it simple and make it relatable for people, because we're all the same. You know, we're just all same people, and to be able to get it in everybody's kitchens is like a big plus for me. And I think that that's what really saved us, is to be able to show our culture, my culture especially, and put it at the forefront of what I learned from my father and my experiences, and also giving the message of us, you know, not just about natives as well in everybody's pantries, but go out and grow it. These are the ones that can grow in your area really well. Like, you know, why are we like, because everybody went gangbusters at all the you know, at plant buying. I think everyone's got a plant now in their home. You know,
Yes.
and I was like, get the natives in there, like throw a bit of a native in there, they'll grow really well. This is how you can use them and make it really user friendly. And I think, you know, for me, that was my main purpose, is to keep my staff in employment, and also you just got to do what you got. Because the first time someone said to me when I first started doing the damper workshops, they said, do you feel comfortable with having to like talk to? I said, I had no choice. It is what I need to do, and this is what I need to do to survive. And I really want to be able to still stay present and show people how cool, like, you know, my culture is of eating bread. And, you know, why make sourdough when you can make damper, you know?
True.
It's
Very, very true.
much quicker and tastier to eat, much quicker and less expensive to make. But it's
And easier to make.
yeah, be excited. You know, I just wanted to be excited about, like, you know, I know we're all going through a tough time. You know, like my household it happened to in my household, and how am I going to, like, you know, really kind of go, we can all do it together, maybe one, you know, damper at a time. Why not?
Well, yes, we can do it. And I think that's a really important thing that you bring up, that damper is a staple food on all island tables. It's something that is there in the morning. It's the first thing that we make, that our Pumley make on the, like, in the morning.
Yes, always. Gotta have a slice of damper.
Amazing. I really like that you actually brought up that you looked back at really thinking about your childhood and introducing a lot of culture, but it reminded you of those basic necessities and having to be like, hang on, slow down, we can do this together. How does this sort of resonate back of who I am? And I really like the way that you really were conscious about your team, your staff. Like, you know, not all places are like that. And I think that just brings back values of, you know, First Nations culture, Indigenous peoples, because I know, same with Erica, you work alongside your husband and your 2 children. And I think that's just really incredible that in these times, you come together as community, you come together as a family, and you just look at, let's just do this. We can still do what we need to do, which is a good segue into that, like, a lot of challenges that, you know, the food industry has. I know with research that there's been, we know that access to affordable and nutritious food is an ongoing problem in remote Indigenous communities. And, you know, many of these remote communities have systemically lost access to their lands and natural resources since colonization. And because you brought up about, Nornie, about not having spinach, but the Warrigal plan, and about, like, we should be using more native species. Why introduce an invasive species? And, you know, this has been for our people, like loss of traditional hunting, you know, fishing areas constrains access to this nutritious fresh food. And I mean, this is a question for both of you. Like, research by Bush Food Sensations recently found that amidst the surging popularity of native foods and uptake by the Australian restaurant industry, Indigenous people actually only receive 1% of the profits. You know, how should we, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, approach our purchases and use of native foods?
Well, Erica, you want to jump in there?
Sure, yeah. So we've got a small farm, Malmaloo. We actually planted some native foods over COVID. It's something we'd been planning to do for a while, but we really want to maintain habitat on our farm. We've got quite a lot of gliders and different species there that we keep that habitat and enhance it. So just been experimenting with things like finger limes, aniseed myrtle, that type of thing. So I've planted some this year, which is exciting. But I'm out in the Gulf this week, Croydon, community here with a large Indigenous population. So we visited the food security workshop this morning, actually, to do a plan for them. Was just getting the community's ideas, and that was certainly something that came up as one of the suggestions, how they can harvest more of the local product, but maybe even grow some of that product in town here. Things like bush cucumbers and different foods that are valued and enjoyed and probably not accessed as much in the past because it's a long way to go out and get them. As well as, a whole lot of great ideas came up, but there's certainly, but as far as buying choices, so definitely support Indigenous businesses where you can with bush foods. And, we're really passionate about supporting Indigenous businesses on the Cape and the Gulf to develop in that industry, like those that are wanting to. And there's plenty of challenges and, things like you're saying, access to different products for them to access them for themselves to eat, let alone to sell those as a product. So, but as far as from a farmer perspective, I really like to see producers using bush foods or planting them as opposed to other food that may take a lot of water resources or require a lot of clearing and things to grow them. So
I think that's really amazing
to hear from Nornie.
I think that's actually really amazing that you're doing these workshops because it's back to reconnection to country for Mob, and it's like growing back our own, I guess, native foods would actually make our country healthier, putting those natural, ingredients, watering it with those right, seeds. That's really amazing. Yourself, Nornie?
Well, for me, it's really important. I think, for the future of us next year, I'm definitely looking at where we're going into farming, and I want to use technology as well as, new found ways of keeping, our natural, because I grew up with farming, we grew everything from our yams to our pumpkins, and then caught everything out of the ocean. Only what you take what you have for the day, so you fish every day, you you plant, my first ever vegetable that I dug up was a manyotha, which is like a cassava, and growing all that and growing bananas and, living off whatever is there. And that's what you eat. And I know that we live in city areas, but, my main thing is to tell people in the city, why not get little pots at the back of on your trestle or whatever and grow yourself some saltbush that will grow into these beautiful bunches. And this stems back to actually growing what is native for those areas, because they will flourish and they will give you such great substance of what you need. And also that will just have a better sustainability for you as well, because you're only going to grow the stuff that actually can grow really well here. And a lot of the stuff, when I talk about natives, especially for Victoria, I only talk about the ones that will grow here. And that's the important bit about it, is that what you can grow here and what you can get out of it. And I think if we keep thinking that way, we're going to be able to change how, we do farming. And I hope that when I go into it next year, because we've got a great plan of doing a great natives, is to bring back those natives and just actually bring back the wildlife too, that kind of went off that as well. And that's the important thing for me. Not only is it important for us for the environment, but it's important for us as people as well to know that we're all Australians and we don't eat enough of our own food, and we don't know enough about it and I think we should be, because there's so many amazing, I love natives. I'm a diehard, and I love native meats. I love fish, all this kind of stuff. And I love living off the land, but we just have to do it, because I think it's a part of us, and we don't get enough time to actually stand back and actually give it a go, because everybody gets like worried when people talk about natives, they're only talking about high-end restaurants, and I'm like, let's get it out of high-end restaurants and in everybody's cupboard.
It should be for everyone, for the everyday person, not just in those fine dining restaurants.
Yeah, it's for everyone. We are all Australian. This is our food. Let's embrace it. Let's eat it. Let's use it. Everybody learns to cook. And it's now up to us to teach people how to use these natives. Then, the Italians taught us how to make pesto. Like, why not us? We learn different techniques with our own food. And I think that's where the important stuff comes in too, as well, for us to change how the way worlds. And I think, the hospitality industry, especially for us, during this period, is going to change dramatically. And if it doesn't, I would be worried, if it doesn't, because if we've seen anything but our local farmers come together and local businesses coming together, when the best thing is seeing a local butcher coming together with local producers who are making their own produce and having one whole place that only has all Australian made stuff in it, is that is just like brilliant there in one go. And I think we should start be thinking that Australia has a lot of, things to offer, and we should be doing it ourselves and not relying on anybody else.
100%. I mean, people get, like you said, you mentioned like, what's Australian food? But that's not really our food. It's like coming back and implementing, native food back on our tables, back on our plates. Because I think that's a really good question into like, what are we learning about food now that will change the way we manage the environment, or just, challenges in the future? Is this something that, you talked about how if the industry, like the hospitality industry, doesn't change, you're right, it makes us a little bit worried. What can we ensure that we do manage this properly and we address these challenges, especially for someone in the industry, and for you both putting it on your plate and like putting it on tables? What can you share a little bit about that, how we can address that?
I think like what Erica paused on earlier is that there are a lot of Indigenous businesses out there. I mean, the biggest Indigenous farm that grows native produce, especially Indigenous native produce, is owned by an Indigenous family, and they supply pretty much almost 80% of restaurants around Australia and support them. People just don't know about them, that, and I'm talking, they took over a bush lolly, they're one of the biggest in native sort of producers in Australia, and we don't talk enough about it. But because I think we're such a small, if you see the native industry, it's so small. It's a tiny, tiny little industry, and everybody is fighting for the little bits and pieces that are all there. And then we end up getting things like Kakadu plums that all get, mostly bought off the tree and then goes to cosmetics, instead of coming into what we should be doing for everybody to eat and to be a part of. So we kind of lose out because we're putting native ingredients on this pedestal of being a superfood that we all miss out on it. We should be just talking about it as our food, our national
nutrition.
Yeah, it's like, once upon a time, people didn't know, oranges was high in vitamin C, before it then became like, everybody has it. I think, we need to stop thinking about our Australian food as something as a specialty for people who can only afford it and put it in their pocket. I want to make sure that it's for everybody to afford, because that will stop the idea of us buying specialty things all the time. And we won't be moving so much around it all the time. We'll be able to get it locally a little bit better because you want the farmers to grow it. And again, it has to come from us. Go to your local grocer every day and ask for natives. All of you, like, go out, ask them for it.
Yes, all of you in the audience, do it.
Yeah, so we can start growing more of it, because the more demand we have, the more we know that we'll get it.
That's it. Erica, can you add to that?
Yeah, I see some of the questions there about how to source and how to know if it's Indigenous owned or not. There is some great online sites that list all the Indigenous food businesses, which I just don't know off the top of my head, but if you do a quick Google search, you should be able to find them, and a lot of them do mail orders and that type of thing. I know quite a few, like the farmers we work with that are growing Indigenous foods, do quite a bit of engaging the local Indigenous community and employment-wise as well. So it's really just getting the same with all produce. I think getting to know the producer and finding their story and finding out what they're doing, how they're producing their product, and what their ethical values are. The producers have a duty to tell that story as well. And some of them are a lot better at growing food than they are at telling their stories. But yeah, just asking farmers markets obviously a great place to get those full stories, and there's getting a lot more online platforms like ours now where you can see more of the story from the producer. And there's certainly some great Indigenous businesses as well that are sourcing other Indigenous products and selling those online for mail order and that type of thing. So yeah.
It's actually, that sort of scares me. It's so overwhelming that we still, in the year of 2020, have so many disparities in the food industry. And I mean, we've got a lot of questions coming in, which is so great. But I feel like, for myself as well, I would like to know is, what are some tools that we can draw on to rethink our food systems and our place in them?
Well, for me, I think I'm a big believer that technology is a way forward for us, of making sure that we can, from whether it's permaculture to, anything that we're doing in our growing system to help with, making sure it's sustainable enough, from using solar to wind power to, really and one thing that I remember growing up with, water tanks, the simple thing of water tanks, tank water is what we use.
Our workshop today is, how about we all have a water tank, because the water's not.
Why don't we just have a water tank, Why can't we petition to have water tanks? I grew up with them. It was what we used for our water because we didn't have running water. We just had what came out of the tanks. And I think that's it's as simple as doing that, just getting permission. The government doesn't want to do that because they want us to pay for water. But we should be having tanks in our yards to help with things like that. Then we won't have these problems of having to worry about water all the time as well. I think there's simple ways to making us go forward sometimes, but we forget about those simple options.
I think now the landscape that we have been in this year, I think it's something that a lot of people are considering and really looking at how to be themselves individually, be more sustainable and not be as so waste-free or be as waste-free as possible. Because I think it's just really highlighted a lot of that. And while people have been in the at home in that space, it's like we got to sort of think about how we can really be more sustainable. Now, we sort of lost you for a red hot minute there, Erica. The digital world today. But I think it's what I'd like to ask you, Erica, is, now what do you think food systems do you think could look like in the future? Because what you focus on is really trying to reduce those food mileages, not saying that properly. But is that something that, is this a part of maybe the future of Farmer Meets Foodie, and like how you create alternatives and paths to getting to be more sustainable for everyone?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting time for agriculture and food. And yeah, certainly, as Nornie indicated, technology can go a long way to making that better on many fronts and connecting people, which is what we're trying to do. But I've really seen since COVID a lot of community, not just individuals pushing for change, but councils and organisations that can see how businesses were really affected during COVID by not being localised, and they're really looking to how they can assist to help those local movements work better and work faster so that they're resilient beyond COVID. I think a lot of councils and community organisations recognise not just pandemics potentially in the future, but also global warming issues, that they're really seeing that they need to be prepared for that on many levels for businesses, but for communities as well. So I'm feeling pretty positive that there will be some ongoing change in this space.
I like that. That's so amazing. Now, we have some incredible questions that have just come into the chat. So they don't necessarily have names to it. So I'm going to sort of read from the top, and whether both of you would like to chime in. And they don't have a name to it, so we can't say like, oh, that's for you, Anna. But I might read them out and see how we go, hey? Our first one says, like, generally looking for guidance for where to source native ingredients, like what people should grow. So I guess like maybe to a specific area. How can people find more about that?
I think you can go to specialty nurseries if you want to grow your own. Definitely go and chat to your local nursery, and then they will actually give you and inform you where you can get it, or get them to get it for you. Say, I want this. Can you get it for me? Like, is it possible? Like, just go out there and ask them to get it for you if you want to. Like, I think, we last year when we were at South Melbourne, we worked closely with places like Bunnings to try and make it affordable to get more plants into their native plants into their nursery, so that it makes it more affordable for people to buy, because natives can be, on the pricier side because it's not commonly asked for. But the more you ask for it, the more it'll be around. And I think that you'll see that a lot more. And I think it depends on your area. Definitely. It depends on your area where you are. And go out and visit your local communities, because they have some great stuff, Like, take the time. We forget to, like, we're too busy living our metropolitan lives sometimes that we forget, like, just go out and have a yarn with somebody. Chat, have a chat, and just ask them. Talk to them, ask them, yourself. Get out there.
Excellent point. If you can try and tap into your local traditional owners and learn from them what's good to eat and what's available, and then local nurseries. There's also some really great online nurseries that can mail. Surprisingly, plants can be sent in the mail things to you, so they're worth having a look at as well.
I've only just recently found that plants can be sold in the mail. I bought something from Melbourne Bush Food, and I was like, oh wow, they sent me a plant. Cool. So good. So another question we have is that I'm a teacher, and my assignment for Year 9 students is to work out of their community, 5-kilometre radius. Community has food security. How do they find out about these wonderful native foods and information? And where do I buy Australian food plants to pop into my veg garden? Very long question. Could you also tell us a little bit about which native ingredients we could grow in our little balconies or backyards here in Melbourne? Yeah, like that'd be interesting in like small spaces. Go, Nornie.
Oh, for sure. There's heaps you can, from from pepper berries to saltbush to sea succulents to river mint. River mint grows really, really well. Very delicious. Very, very vibrant to use. Sea parsley. We also do. There's so many. I don't know what it's like. Yam daisies are really great. If it is for kids, why instead of putting carrots and potatoes in the garden. Why not put some yam daisies in there? We need to bring them back. They're natural to Victoria, and they're really awesome to dig up and have different types of yams. I'm a big yam pusher. I love a yam. So I want more yams out there. So go out and get your local yams, So yeah, there's so many different natives, and you've got all the fruit trees from. We have quandongs, we have desert limes, you name it. We've got there's a whole bunch that you can get. But if you're in Melbourne, go to your local nursery and just ask them what's the nearest native nursery. But if you're in around, Ceres has a really good collection of natives that you can buy, from beautiful edible stuff to also, native plants as well. So Ceres is pretty good for that as well. But then you have Billy Nursery too in Port Melbourne, which really do some amazing natives as well. So there's a few different ones that you can actually use. You can get some great natives for your gardens and stuff.
Thank you for sharing that, because there's been a few people actually just asking a little bit about that in the chat. I think an important question that I like here, if maybe Erica, you can answer this one, is just, I'm really pleased that a change has occurred during COVID, but how do we maintain this movement? I think that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I guess it's, really thinking. I mean, I know myself, it's very tempting to just go straight back to the supermarket as things are back to normal. So it's really thinking about where you're sourcing your food, how you can support local producers and Indigenous producers. So a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight, where you can access those things at markets and online. And I guess, and growing, as Nornie said, growing in your own yard, just having some of those things that continues to connect you to that food, I think is really important if you're in a position to do that. And probably just continue to have discussions in your local area with your community and what kind of future you're wanting to see.
No, thank you. And Nornie, would you like to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, I think it, like I said earlier as well, it comes from us. So it's our responsibility to keep that movement going on and maintaining it. And if it comes from the individual, I think we all have to own that, and we all have to own our responsibilities as well. And I think, hopefully, I would hope, especially in the industry that I am in, which is hospitality, that we really do make a great change of really, I've been very lucky that I've kept in touch with all of my suppliers during this time and having personal relationships with them, because everyone is important. And I think, sharing that love around of your community, producers is where you want. And it's not just about, it's like, when COVID hit, the meat industry went from here to like up here, where everybody just went out and bulk buy. Like, I'm sure people have legs of racks of lamb and everything that's going to last them a year in their freezers from it. And it is our responsibility. And then people forgot about the seafood industry, when they went out and did all that. And I had one of my suppliers say that 60% of his staff had to be let go during this period. And I think we should learn how to share the love around with every produce you eat. Eat everything. Don't just stick to one thing. I think we should eat everything that is available to us, but obviously in moderation if we can, but support everybody in your community. And I've been really grateful that in my community where I have my business, is that the community came out and supported all of us individually in different ways. And I think that movement will still exist if we keep up with it ourselves as well.
And it comes down to health as well. Like, stop the processed foods and let's go back to real flavor that has a lot of nutrition. And I think that's like another question that's come through is someone has asked is, I wonder how we could get these ideas into school canteen and tuck shops to start re-educating sustainable eating? You know, a lot of schools I've seen have, you know, got their own veggie gardens and patches now. Is this something that you both would, I mean, I know that support, but, you know, is there any ideas of how we can make that happen? Erica?
Yeah, schools I've worked with before, we've done, you know, bush food gardens. Damper making is a great one for introducing bush foods, because you can put different things into the damper flour, but also you can have some of the native fruits as on the damper as well. So that's a great kind of intro one, I feel, to introduce kids to new tastes. But yeah, there's a lot you can do in schools with, you know, growing food. Just, I mean, a lot of schools have kitchen gardens now, so if you haven't already introduced bush foods from that perspective, it's, yeah, the perfect opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Erica. I think, you know, when it comes to sustainability in canteens and school tuck shops, I reckon we just go sustainability more than anything, you know. Use sustainable meat, use sustainable, you know, what can kids eat? And I think, like, you know, for me, I remember growing up, I got given whatever I was told to eat, you know. I think we change it up for kids these days. We pretty much let them get away with everything, and that goes back to our responsibility of making sure that they eat what they're given. And if this is what we can give them, then this is what we can give them, because I guarantee you, if we don't change now, then our kids, or my kids' future, their kids will not get this opportunity to have a choice of what they have. So we need to kind of think that it's up to us to make it sustainable for them now, so every generation can have it for the future.
I like that. We're here now. You've been to this conversation. It's our own responsibility now that we ensure we spread the word and be more sustainable and ethical about our food source. A really important question, because I sometimes have trouble too, but there's a question about, is there a resource to find Indigenous businesses? Because some will say Indigenous, you know, we support Indigenous communities but aren't Indigenous owned. So is there a way that we can actually peel through that information?
Yeah, definitely. There are resources coming up, actually, that will be put out in the next month or so, where you can actually have a hub for Indigenous businesses that you can think, and you can go on the agriculture websites as well, because they actually show up Indigenous farms and businesses that you can support, where it'll give you a link to go off and see these amazing farms that are out there. But it's simple as, you know, you looking up something on Uber Eats. You know, you can look up online and go, you know, here's the Indigenous community down in Minnejindo and what they're doing. So, you know, I think with the way technology goes now, it's a lot more easier than it was a long time ago. Like, you know, it's easier these days to find these amazing communities that are actually like selling stuff. You know, I can buy straight from communities, and you know, I don't have to go through a wholesaler and all this kind of stuff. You as an individual can talk to, you know, an organization. They're always set up really well to, you know, be able to buy from. So it's easier than you think.
Now we have time for one last question that I would love for you both to answer or elaborate or add to. But what are 3 steps that we could go and do right now? Go.
Okay, you could go and find 3 new farmers in your area to buy from. You could go and introduce yourself to your local TO, traditional owners, find out some more about their bush foods. I have to think about the 3rd one. I don't know if it's already right.
Yeah, look, I agree with Erica. Go out, talk to your local suppliers, you know, and even just your local supermarket guys. You know, if you've got an IGA or somebody or whatever, you know, whatever works for you, because not everybody can find a market or a thing. You may not have transport or stuff. Just go down to your local guys and just speak to them. and start the conversation. I think we need to have more relationships with people who we buy produce from, and it doesn't matter who you are. I think we just have to open those floodgates for you to understand, and for all of us to understand where everything comes from. And it might be hard for people that come from different communities. So I think there's a lot of steps that you can take, and but definitely go out there, talk to people and say hello and meet people. I think you have to extend your, I like to live in this village. I call it the village. And I just continuously keep making my village get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's from all my producers to everybody I work with and all the relationships that I have with people, and build your own community, your own village. And one thing COVID has taught us between what has happened here is that our local high streets are amazing. Our local high streets have shone light on so many small businesses that we never thought about because we were too busy going to some other suburb for something. And so think local first and then go out.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think the third thing I'd add would just be expanding on what Nornie's saying, is just to be asking wherever you're shopping, if it's a supermarket or wherever, asking where the food's coming from, how far it's travelled. I think, before COVID, probably if you ask that in a major supermarket, people would be horrified. But now I think everyone's asking the same questions, and it's the right time to be continuing those conversations.
And I think just to add to all of what you were both saying is that you can only do with what you've got. And with, one thing is that we've seen is that our income has come down a little bit during this time. So we've had to adapt. So don't be so hard on yourself. Do what you can in the space that you've got, because those little steps is how we can, create more of a circle and space and be sustainable and ethical as possible. But before I close up, is there any final words from both Nornie and Erica that you would like to share with the audience? I'm going to go, Erica, you go first.
I'd just like to thank Seed and the Environmental Film Festival for this opportunity, and Nornie and Tish, really enjoyed the conversation this evening, and everyone who's tuned in and for your fabulous questions. Happy to answer any more via email or through our website if you didn't get them answered tonight. Just email me at info@farmeetsfoodie.com.au. More than happy to continue the discussion.
Amazing. And Nornie.
Yeah, thanks guys for this opportunity. It's been fantastic, and I think for me is I'll look forward to seeing you all. Come have a chat. Let's talk about things. We're always open to having chats with everyone and enjoy life. If COVID has taught us anything, go out, enjoy the people around you, enjoy your lives. Don't take the little steps that we do gets us to our goals, and we can actually have a good time getting there as well. Because that's what I feel like. I want to have a good time getting to those places as well. We don't have to take life too seriously, but we do need to look at something seriously. But have a good time doing it, because that's the only way we're going to make change. Is if you enjoy what you're doing to make change, then that's all that matters.
I love that. That was actually really both inspirational. I was just like, yes, I will. Slow down.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful.
So thank you both to Erica and incredible discussion, just an introduction of how we can really start shifting in the space that we are in and do more of have more of an individual impact too. To support both Mabu Mabu and Farmer Meets Foodie, please head to their socials, which we will have links to their website, I think, in the chat. A few people sort of asked about damper. Head to Mabu Mabu if you want to go onto those damper workshops, and especially if you want to talk about some seasonal food. I know that Erica had some good talking about seafood. She's got some boxes there, so definitely go to their socials, follow their stories, because they are both doing incredible things and making a huge impact in shifting the way we see the food industry. Now, there are some big gaps still in the food industry, the way that we are sustainably, ethically, and we source our food. So now as we move into this post-COVID-19, whether it's like this still apocalyptic landscape, I don't know, that's just me trying to be hilarious, but this may be a time where we actually look at reverting back to the past. You know, we heard about how we had things in the in community back when we, like Nornie talks about her culture back when she was younger, just simple ingredients, simple processes. Australia's native plants have fed humans for thousands and thousands of years, providing a rich bounty with nutritional content that has been shown to be so far more superior than the acai berry. So to meaningfully engage in First Nations communities, you know, let's look at ways of knowing and interacting with country. We need to really cease being informants and actors and consultants, which at best marginally inform ecological and agricultural imperatives. We need to work with local Indigenous businesses and, importantly, communities, because we must continue to focus on local Indigenous food knowledge and local farmers and their practices to advance sovereignty of food, but importantly, country. We need to be rethinking our food systems. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. I was just like to that pause. It's like keep continuing following Out of This World for the next week, and follow us on socials to share to hear more about it. Have a wonderful night.